Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. We're doing another tier ranking for Guild Wars 2. This time it's going to be the expansions and seasons slash one saga. So welcome. I love giving unsolicited advice and opinions and judgment, but welcome. I hope you guys enjoy it. Let's just get going, I guess. First and foremost, we have base Guild Wars 2. Now, Base Guild Wars 2 released in 2012. It's been 8 years or so, so it's a little bit old, and objectively looking at it from playing it multiple times and what we know now, I would say Base Guild Wars 2 is pretty much at a B tier. It has great open world content, but for the story as a whole, which this video is centered around, is the narrative and the plot and the delivery of the plot, I'd say it's pretty B tier. There's a lot of strings that they have to attach, some stories that have gone untold, so on and so forth. So for that reason, it's above passing. It does a solid job. It's pretty mid-tier. Next, we have the very first season, which technically isn't in game, so I'm gonna kind of skip over that one a little bit. And also, Season 1 and Season 2 both have the same icon slash logo, which is really dark and doesn't really go great on this background. But Season 1 was okay, it's different. But Season 2, which is the one I'm going to be focusing on, I would say Season 2... How I feel about Season 2. Damn it, I really should have thought about this all the way through. I would say Season 2 is kind of at a B tier as well in the delivery. It was definitely a bit more of a narrow scope. It just didn't... Actually, I would say Season 2 is pretty A. If we're judging this solely based on the narrative, the lore, and the execution of it, I would say Season 2 did pretty well. It had quite the narrow scope in terms of being in the Maguma area, going through the Silver Wastes and Dry Top, and it was short and sweet, but it was definitely sweet. It was just that. It tasted good. It felt nice. It was a good transition into the expansion. I do think the season progressively got better, which is always great to have, as opposed to starting really strong and kind of dwindling. So in that regards, I would think Season 2 is pretty A tier. Next up, we have Heart of Thorns. Now, I'm very tempted to put Heart of Thorns at A or S tier. I don't know if it's because of nostalgia or whatever, but I think I'll put it at S tier, considering it's Guild Wars 2's first expansion. Though they did have expansions before as ArenaNet, the company. They've delivered expansions before with Guild Wars 1, but for Guild Wars 2, it was kind of new territory. And I think Guild Wars 2 Heart of Thorns had probably one of my favorite stories. It was very creepy. It was eerie. Seeing a bunch of the Sylvari turn into your enemies and not knowing who's going to get corrupted next or what's necessarily going to happen. So I think in that regard, Heart of Thorns really drew me in, and it was probably my favorite time playing Guild Wars 2. They didn't have mounts. The masteries were you know, new and pretty solid. We only had gliding. Everything just felt like Guild Wars 2, but an improved version. Next up, we have Living World Season 3. Living World Season 3 was... This was like a lot. Season 3 was a lot. There were a lot of plots that they were covering. We had some human stuff. We had some Asura stuff with Tiny. And then, of course, we had Balthazar stuff. And Codicus and the White Mantle. So it was definitely... There was a lot going on. But much like Season 2, I think Season 3 was decent. It was pretty decent, in my opinion. I still had a lot of fun. Granted, the release cadence was a bit weird at times, but we're not necessarily taking that into account. It's mostly just the story. It's okay. It's okay. I'm saying it's an A tier. It did its job, and it was effective. A lot of cool stuff with the gods. Next up, we have Guild Wars 2 Path of Fire. And I think for the story for Path of Fire... Oh god, I almost was putting it an S tier, but I don't know. I'm having an internal conflict as I make this video. Because there were some parts of Path of Fire which I hold in a high regard, I praise. But there are other parts where I feel like they really dropped the ball and they sped up so quickly in Path of Fire. So I honestly think Path of Fire is kind of A tier. I feel like the story went by too fast. They could have had more episode chapter beats. And I feel like they could have fleshed out Casimir so much more than they did. And give Canuck a little bit more incentive to like have like this weird gambling side, and he's maybe backstabbed a couple people and they need money. He's betrayed someone. Ritlock was okay. He had the beat where he knew Balthazar but didn't know it was Balthazar. We never really got an explanation of how he became a Revenant necessarily, but we have since gotten like mutterings that Clint taught him the ways of the Revenants. I would have loved to see an actual scene of that, but they kind of just told us. They didn't show us, which is not really great when you're talking about story design. But I think Path of Fire did its job and has done it well. Oh, okay. So I would think Path of Fire is pretty A tier. It's pretty solid, pretty good. Could have been a little bit longer. Next up, we have Living World Season 4. Living World Season 4... Oh god, just like Season 3, there was a lot going on. We had Joko, we had Falcatoric, we had more inquests. We didn't really have a lot of the dwindlings of Balthazar. And for that reason, I think I'm going to place it at a B tier. I think so far my position with Living World Season 4 was that I would have loved to see more of the immediate downfall of Balthazar and the repercussions that had throughout the human kingdom, the religion, the Zaishin. We never got anything with the Zaishin in Path of Fire, and I think that is really sad. We could have had like 3 or 4 chapters, not chapters, but story missions on the Zaishin themselves and seeing a human aspect to the story. I think that's where Path of Fire and Living World Season 4 kind of failed. It was a human-centric story, but not a lot of humans were a part of it, per se, that were in support of Balthazar. And they were there, but we never really saw them, except in the first map. And I would have loved to see more of what happened to the Zaishin at the start of Episode 4, and then lead into the Joko stuff, and then finish with Krakatoric. Once again, I think Season 4 could have been a little bit longer in this regards as well, but I think the Krakatoric stuff was really great. They killed off Joko pretty quickly. He was a supporting villain, which, you know, I think is fine, but they killed him off, and then they just moved directly to Krakatoric. And I think the Krakatoric stuff was where the season really shined, and it became so much more invigorating. I would have loved to have seen Zoja, because she had stakes in Krakatoric as well, but she never showed up. Rest in peace, Zoja. Can we just write her off as dead already and like stop with the suspense, because it's kind of ridiculous at this point. She's had so many opportunities to show up, but they've never really utilized her. And then finally, this brings us to the Iceberg Saga. Now, the Iceberg Saga is not complete yet. Full disclosure, it's not complete yet. But I'm saying it's kind of on a downward trend. Remember what I said about Season 2, I think I said it about? Where it was like it progressively got better? Iceberg Saga, or Season 5, the official name is Iceberg Saga. Iceberg Saga is doing the opposite. I feel like it started off really strong with the prologue episode, and it's just kind of dwindling down. And so far, if I were to make this and it was at the prologue and Episode 1, I would have said S tier. I think Iceberg Saga started off killer. Episode 2 kind of dropped it down to A. Visions of the Past, even though it's not the main narrative, might have kept it at an A. Episode 3 maybe kept it at an A. It was a new map, new things, kind of bopped it to a B. And then Episode 4 was just... I have not enjoyed Episode 4. The only redeeming part about Episode 4 was Jormag, but We'll have to see what happens with the next couple episodes. Honestly, if the next episode continues to go downwards, it's not going to look good for the Iceberg Saga. I feel like the Iceberg Saga could be the only narrative chunk, lore chunk of Guild Wars 2's history where, in my opinion, it's fallen below a B average according to this ranking, where it's just become acceptable, and it might even drop to a D where you're not failing, you're delivering a product, but I'm not satisfied with it, even in the bare minimum. But for now, I would say it's probably a safe B, because I have to give it its leeway. It's had good moments. Once again, I think the strong start definitely has to balance out the somewhat waning drive in the story. Which is why the concept of seasons is so weird, because it's a live thing. If you hit a bump in the road, that's kind of where you're left at. And it's not like an expansion where you might hit a bump in the middle of the expansion, but there's still more to play. It's not a finished product, so it's very strange. It's like it's live art. It's art that is continuing to change, and you might like the middle or the beginning incarnation. You might hate the middle incarnation. It might get a little bit better. It might then take a sharp left and you hate it again. And then by the end, you kind of accept it. And it's like pretty good. So we'll have to see how the rest of the season plays out. And then, of course, we have expansion 3 on the way, which I'm very excited about. I would love to hear more on that soon. I really hope they blow expansion 3 out of the park. It wraps up kind of Guild Wars 2 as a whole. And then maybe they go to Guild Wars 3 or another offshoot of the Guild Wars franchise. Or honestly, if they stop at expansion 3, I will be very sad. I would love if they did like a little bit more with Guild Wars 2 and was able to update the engine and continue to go on to tell these stories. Area is such an expansive world where they really have like 5 games worth of stuff. Like they can keep going for as long as they desire, as long as their income is coming in and so on and so forth. But I think Guild Wars 2's engine is it's showing its time, and I think it's somewhat limiting, especially to the developers working on it. So if they're able to transport the game into another engine, or build another game on an engine and kind of have everything kind of carry over some way, like innovate on a sequel or a trequel? Truple? Anyway, thank you everybody so much for watching this unsolicited tier making video on the Guild Wars 2 expansions and seasons. I hope you guys enjoyed. I would love to hear your comments down below on which was your favorite expansion and seasons. What tier would you place at? For me, Heart of Thorns hit that sweet spot. The other seasons 1, 2, 3, and Path of Fire, done well. And then the rest have kind of been a little bit lower than that. But I would love to hear your guys. Did you love Path of Fire? Did you hate it? Did you love Heart of Thorns? Did you hate it? How did you feel about Season 4? And all my links are down below. You guys know what to do. You've been on the internet long enough. If you would like to support me, that'd be great. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye, everyone!